I'm Anne Snellgrove McKerracher.
And I'm David McKerracher. You're listening to What's Right.
And today we are joined once again by friend of the channel, Nina Power. How's it going, Nina? We're happy to have you here.
Good, good. I just came back from Kew Gardens, which is this very beautiful natural place in London. Well, it's sort of actually highly
Nice.
artificial in a way because it's very constructed and very man-made. I prefer the wild pile of weeds type nature, but anyway.
Right.
And then I was held up by pride, but I'm here now.
Awesome. Yeah. There's a line in my favorite band is the 1975. They're from Manchester. And there's a line in one of their songs from their latest album that says Central Park is SeaWorld for trees. Which I think is just really interesting. Like, yeah, we construct these natural places. Like you go to SeaWorld, oh, I'm seeing wild animals. And then like that's not their actual habitat. There's nothing wild necessarily about these dolphins and whales in their, confines. And so you're saying Central Park is like that for trees, like this very artificially constructed forest in the middle of like the biggest city. So that is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there are some great trees in Kew Gardens. I mean, there are some amazing stuff there, like to be
For
clear.
sure,
Like
yeah.
I'm not dissing Kew Gardens.
Oh,
It is very impressive. But yes, it's this kind of very refined nature, it's very manicured, it's very selected, it's, posh bit of town.
Yeah.
It's a nice sort of lead into talking about nature. This is the episode in which we wanted to talk about part 2 of the philosophy of nature is getting rolled out. We are officially, now that we just finished out the Hegel lecture that you gave, that's the close of part 1, which was quite the ride from the pre-Socratics through, Hegel. Now we'll be getting into Nietzsche and Marx and all these other thinkers, bringing in a bunch of feminism and other kinds of stuff that I was kind of going over it just in the putting together of the thumbnail for this. And I'm getting excited just thinking about it. And one thing I was thinking we could talk about is just a little bit about why it is that we care, each of us probably in various ways for our own reasons. And I'll just say, for me, I was having a conversation with a friend earlier today about this, and I was saying, if for me, the reason that this has become such a big deal that I when I heard that you were teaching this course, I was instantly like, oh, I wish more than anything I could have been there, and that's what this comes out of. Well, part of why that's true is because for both Anne and I, we're always thinking about where we are historically, and we're on the frontier of that moment in the history of humanity when it becomes undeniable that transhumanism is a real thing and that it's rising and it's accelerating really fast. And CRISPR technology, so you can do genetic engineering as well as low cost genetic engineering, as well as Neuralink. These make it undeniable that this is a thing. Yet at the same time, it's become almost taboo to talk about it, especially in terms of transhumanism, because any time that it's happening, it's either just a consumer choice or it's highly politicized, and in such a way that there's really no longer term thinking or complexity or in this case sort of basis in the history of ideas. And so that's why I'm really excited. And I know Anne had a few things she wanted to say on that, but I'm just, maybe Nina, you could say a few things as well about what initially had you interested in this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you about the sort of transhumanist moment, and I think in terms of taboo words, I think speaking about nature and speaking about life and speaking about our own nature and our own sexed being and things like that have become increasingly contentious subjects in recent years, and I don't think that's a coincidence. How to put it? I think that my love of nature, by which I mean animated life, I suppose, something that is not artificially constructed by man, and this also includes us the fact that we are animated, that we have souls, that we are not merely, meat buckets or, nodes in something, or, the very reductionist images we have of the human that are very dominant today. I think my love and instinct or intuition to protect nature, or to feel like on the side of protecting nature, whatever that means, right? This is a very hazy intuition in some ways, is partly aesthetic. It's partly increasingly religious, insofar as I think that the creation itself is something that we are here to be trustees of, not to exploit until it is destroyed, even though that has characterized much of human activity, right? I don't think it's inevitable that we treat the non-human nature in a particular way, right? Even though we might feel this kind of great weight of inevitability and this determinism and about how human beings basically go one direction only. And I think this is also something that's structuring the way we historically approach nature, right? Like whether we're thinking about this sort of accelerationist thing, or, oh, it's inevitable, right? This is just what human beings do. It's our own nature, in fact, to destroy nature and so on. And that would include our own nature. And I feel it, apart from anything else, I feel like there should be voices resisting that, or at least going, hang on a minute, like, are we sure? Are we sure we want to like go pretend that we're like beyond the body? Are you sure you want to pretend that like the techno-medical approach to everything is the correct one? I don't think it is. I think there are other ways of living, and I think that having a sort of purely scientific or quasi-scientific worldview, or reductionist or economic worldview, or functionist worldview, or whatever, or utilitarian worldview, all of these are hugely limited, hugely unaware of man's place in nature, whatever that is. And the entire point of looking at the history of thinking about nature was to sort of deepen that question in all its sort of sincerity and seriousness. Like, what have the great minds of the ancient Greece, everyone from ancient Greece to today, had to say about this term nature, which is both underdetermined and kind of omnipresent, and also slightly taboo, and also like very evocative. So yeah, that's what we've been doing. I guess we're sort of up to the Enlightenment, just after the Enlightenment right now.
Right. Yeah, it is so interesting to me how contentious this topic seemingly is, and even not so much contentious, but just like how much people don't even think about how much everything has changed with all of these new technologies and kind of what it means to be human, and the biological nature of our human processes are just, we don't really think about them or take them seriously. Like, I just think about the amount of women, for example, that just get Botox and lip fillers as a way of like, altering the aging process. Even girls as young as 18 are getting these procedures done, and then they look like they're 30 something. We can, like, I have my own feelings about that type of thing, but I think it just points more broadly to the culture and the era that we're in right now, of just people, no one taking our, like, the natural processes of the human body very seriously. It just, oh yeah, just take some drugs. Oh yeah, just pop this pill. Oh yeah, just do that, without actually considering what that's doing to us on this like physical biological level, but what that's doing to the culture, what maybe that's doing to us spiritually, and affecting our mentality towards thinking about aging and life and death and human nature, or yeah, just like these natural processes. And so I tend to be more on the resistance side, and just like with the transhumanism, with the cosmetic procedures, with even AI and chat GPT and stuff, I'm pretty resistant to that kind of stuff. I'm just like, nope, we don't need it. I think we should get rid of it, tomorrow, is like my position for the most part. And so it's just interesting how the lack of conversation or talking about and taking this stuff seriously from like a philosophical and sociological perspective, I think just leads to the development of these new technologies and procedures that no one's thinking about or taking seriously. And just kind of, oh yeah, it's just whatever. It's like, well, is it just whatever? Um, so yeah, this topic really matters. I know to
Hmm.
Dave and I, as we think about family and children
Hmm.
and health and all of these things. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the second half of this course. I've not been able to do some of the readings for the first half, but I think this has put a lot on my radar. Like I'm actually really excited to read Spinoza
Hmm.
sometime soon. Because I thought was really interesting week for me. Uh, yeah, and this is just a topic that is interesting if you care about humans or the good life or the world around you.
Yeah, I mean, just to comment on the aging thing, it's like I was looking after somebody, a relative who has dementia at the moment, and just sitting with her, and she often has the television on, and I wish I don't watch television. I sometimes I watch films, obviously, for the lack, but generally everything's online, right? We don't have a television, and there's a sort of different. I'm not saying it's better, actually. I mean, maybe I'm just not used to it, but there's a sort of passive receptivity of the television and the certain kind of things that are on. And they had this program called Love Island, which was like lots of young people with very sort of extreme kind of already facial modifications of various kinds, or injections and things like that, and also the makeup. And it really struck me that actually what this is about, it's about a relationship to the machine, and the machine is the camera, right? These are ways of looking, not to attract a mate, not to like appeal in a wholesome way to another human body, but to in a way make love to the camera. Like these are faces for the camera. And I was like, wow, this machinic, this imagistic sort of self iconography has been so internalized that now you see, and when you see women like that, in the largely women, although there are lots of men who are also very vain in a particularly modern contemporary way as well, right? Like who are also posing for the camera. When you see people with this mindset, this visual mindset walking around, they look kind of strange because they're not doing it for the world or for the social anymore. Like there is no social, there is only the camera. And I was just very struck by this, like, particular, and even though the camera is, more than 100 years old at this point, it has had this profound effect on the way we think about like our memories. We talk about snapshots and the face, the idea that one can capture the face in a particular way, and that one is already sort of filtering one's face for the camera. Um, and I think the delayed effect of machine technology on our self-perception is also like really profound. Like, the camera is still having this effect. It's just being updated all the time. Even though now it's a relatively older technology compared to some of the newer ones. Yeah, and it's very, yeah. And I think this absence of thinking about death is also key. This came up in what you were saying. Like we've just had these death bills passed, right? You could say, well, actually, aren't we talking about death all the time? I mean, yes, in a way, right? But what they mean by death is, I suppose, a kind of hygienic, technocratic, economic idea of death. Like, oh, you're a burden. They remove these safeguards from the bill. Okay, you don't want to be a burden to your kids. Oh, you've run out of money. Oh, you're ill, but whatever. Oh, you're depressed. Like, let the state handle it, you know. And
What does
death
the
just
bill
becomes, oh, sorry.
allow for? Yeah.
So it's kind of Britain's made. So we had an assisted suicide bill that just passed only by 23 votes. It could be struck down by the Lords in some complicated technical way. It will take a while to implement, whatever. But the sad thing is that this bill passed, and it doesn't have many safeguards, including things around people saying I don't want to be a burden, which you'd think is a very obvious red flag if someone was going to a doctor and saying that. Um, and it's just of a piece with general, also in COVID, this kind of technocratic, bureaucratic, the state will deal with your life and death and everything about you, and you are just a number on a sheet of paper, and sometimes you're a pain, and sometimes we want you to die. And as people have pointed out, like the COVID mantra was like, you have to lock down and vaccinate to save Granny, and now it's like, oh, kill Granny. Like, Granny's a pain in the ass, right? Granny's costing the state too much. So yeah, but I what we're seeing, I think, is this total, the state just expanding into all these realms of life, which are actually the domain of well, religion, poetry, family, and everything else, right? What the fuck does the state have to do with like my death? You know what I mean? Like, hopefully nothing. And everything is just becoming this, yeah, part of the technocratic churn, including these like the deepest matters, right? Our nature, our health, our suffering, our life and death, and the meaning that we have for those things and they have for other people. Yeah.
I I was the way I was thinking about the assisted suicide approach. I think maybe it was initially at the point that I started to think about it more philosophically, inspired by Agamben, who talks about it as the sort of well, this is how you see where sovereignty exists, right? Sovereignty, whether it exists in people or in the state, or through a distributed bureaucracy, which he's leaning towards. You can see sovereignty existing wherever someone is drawing the line through a gray area, but given the technology we now have, the gray area is between keeping people who are now alive only in a technical sense, but really they're a sort of vegetable, keeping them alive indefinitely, versus on the other side, state assisted suicide, right? So on the one side, it's like, oh, you're a burden. Let's unplug you metaphorically. But then in the other case, it's like, well, yeah, you're a burden, but it is ours to bear. Now we're going to keep you plugged in indefinitely, right? And it's like, these are both problems unique to our current moment, right? Like, I guess you could imagine assisted suicide existing in any society, but you can't imagine the human vegetable problem. Like that's a modern machinic issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the problems is that the conceptual apparatuses we have for thinking through these bioethical moral problems are extremely reductive, right? They don't take into account the kind of nexus of relations, our kind of embeddedness. Do you know what I mean? Like there is no, I don't know how to put it. I mean, philosophy is in large part to blame for this in some ways because of its way of abstracting out thought experiments, and trying to construct abstract structures and systems, right? Which is basically like engineering for like word cells, right? Like, um, and I, obviously, I think it's very important to be able to think abstractly and to understand like the great systems, to read Hegel and so on, right? Like I think there's a lot there, but I think the limitations of that way of thinking in general come up against the sort of specificity of lived life, of life as it's lived, right? We're now far too used, I think, to dealing with abstractions, and we're dominated by them. And ideology functions in this way. We're sort of given various abstractions, and then people have to kind of live in accordance with these abstractions. And this just seems to be the kind of creature that we are. Somehow we have this form of sapience, or way of thinking, but it's very powerful. These abstractions are very powerful. So there isn't, let's put it this way, there isn't a good solution to these gray area problems, and that's kind of the point,
Right.
actually. When the state steps in and says, aha, we have the solution, right? This is when you have to worry, actually, because their motivation is inevitably efficiency, and the flip side of efficiency is incompetence. So, you might survive, but only because like the state is inept.
Hmm.
Um, and it takes every power out of the hands of people. And this, you could be a leftist and say this, you could be a rightist and say this. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think this is one of Agamben's great strengths, that he's not immediately pin downable in this way.
Mm-hmm. Right. Even though, of course, they kind of tried recently, Jean-Luc Nancy and the rest of them,
Mhm.
because of COVID. But I guess the I think I get this from the conversation you recently had with Louise Perry. Part of what's happening is a sort of bio libertarian extremism is taking off, where it's saying any fetter on the individual liberty to consume, right? Just this sort of consumerist based idea of liberty, any fetter placed on that is what's bad. With the exception of this bureaucracy expanding approach to what they call harm reduction. And Patrick J. Deneen, I was rereading him recently, and he was talking a lot about that. It seems related, and it seems like a big part of what we're dealing with. And right now, there's a couple people in the chat who've been kind of going back and forth, and I can't keep up with it. But I know the general idea is like, well, it's arbitrary, to go against this, that, or the other aspect of technological progress. What it's all subjective and historically contingent. And it's like, what we're here outside of the Amish. This is what we exist in. There's no getting out of it. And not only does that seem like a cop out from thinking seriously about how there are different kinds of technology and different ways of employing them and different ways of gaining one's own freedom from the state as well as from capital. I don't know. It also just seems to be oversimplifying everything you're all saying. And I think it misses the point. So I guess I wanted to say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think technology is another great abstraction. I mean, this is why, like, when Ivan Illich says it's not technology, it's tools, and we need to look at each specific tool and say, like, is this convivial or is it not, right? Like, this actually blows that kind of technological abstraction out of the water. And it also avoids that kind of too easy determinism, right? Like, oh, of course, this is where we're at. Of course, this is where we're going to go. Of course, this is... Do you know what I mean? It's inevitable, right? I think because I mean, if you think about it in terms of tools instead, there are many things that we used to use that we don't use anymore. We make decisions all the time. I don't drive, for example. Like, I don't use a car. I don't have a television. I don't have a dishwasher. I mean, okay, like at the level of, this doesn't matter at the level of politics, right? In a certain sense. And I certainly don't think that kind of lifestyle choices in that way are, efficacious of major change, right? But it does demonstrate that there is, like, how to put it, there is no inevitability to whatever the range of technology. I don't use ChatGPT or any AI. Like, why would I? I write and I read books. Like, why would I? Why would I use AI? It also reads like a retarded sort of 2-2 essay. Like, I hate this style of, like, hi, there, like someone explaining something to you, like the who's completely stupid, like someone who thinks they know something and doesn't really, but it's slightly out. It doesn't know that they don't know. That's what AI always sounds like when people post it or use it. Anyway, whatever.
It's
Sure. I
bad.
mean, everyone's
Yeah.
gonna lose their job, but some of us don't have jobs anyway. It's fine. I don't know. I don't know, man.
On the bio libertarian extremism
Yeah.
and sort of eugenics thing. This kind of forces us to think about. Anne was saying something about an abortion story she heard recently that
Yeah.
I can't stop thinking about it. Yeah.
I'm assuming it's this one, Dave. I was just listening to this book while working called Domestic Extremist by P.G. Keenan. Um, and my jaw dropped when I heard that this is a thing that people can do, but it's called selective reduction, I think, where if you find out that you're pregnant with twins or triplets, you can go and have an abortion of just one of those babies. If are pregnant with multiple, but you only want to have one, you can just choose one to get rid of. And I was like, that that's wild that we've gotten to the point where that's like you still want to have a baby. You don't want to not be pregnant, but you only want one, even though through whatever forces you got two or three or four or whatever. And that was really shocking to me that that is a thing that people opt to do. And I've been listening to some other just like podcasts in that book as well, talking about some of the ethical implications of not only abortion, but IVF or surrogacy. And I think, yeah, our societal views on specifically like childbirth and pregnancy and how the nature part of it is seemingly so removed that now it's just like, oh, I accidentally got two. Whoops, I'll just return this one. Like it's so removed, and I find that shocking and horrifying. Probably is the word I would use. Yeah, Dave, did you have other thoughts on that one?
I mean, I'd heard of people getting screenings to find out if their kid had like Down syndrome or something, or autism or just some other, something that might make the parent go, oh no, I'm going to get an abortion in this case. And I remember people who were very pro-choice being extremely anti that choice, right? And it's like, well, that's the future we're really quickly moving into. And so it to me, as I think for at least 10 years, I've been like, yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing that kind of comes with this territory. But hearing you say that someone did that within the last few years where they went and they were having triplets. And so they were like, no, I'm going to get one removed. Like that to me was just, I don't know, I don't even have words. Right. And so I think that's part of what this course is about, is this kind of stuff that leaves us speechless and gives us cause for concern, or to at least stop and think. It gives us something more. Hopefully it'll supply us with a wider field of concepts, ideas, thinkers, through which to think about this stuff. And so maybe we could say a bit about how you're thinking about part one and part two, the kinds of thinkers we're drawing on.
Yeah, sure. So we've gone all the way from the pre-Socratics and the atomists in particular. We looked at Lucretius, De Rerum Natura, beautiful poem, written for his friend to try and convince his friend not to be afraid of death, and just explaining the natural processes in this Epicurean manner. We looked at Spinoza, the idea of Deus sive natura, the idea of God's creation is immanent, and nature as this kind of unfolding substance. We also looked at Kant and Hegel and the kind of attempt to create a kind of philosophy of nature in the age of the Enlightenment, and in competition really with the rise of the natural sciences. So what role for the philosophy of nature when science seems to be steaming ahead in terms of how to map and understand the natural world. So I think the break here now is with Nietzsche. So we're going to say, I think what characterizes this break, I was thinking about this on the way here, is really like the revenge of nature in a certain way. Um, the fact that actually nature, and in particular our own nature, cannot simply be rationalized away. Right. So I think one of the important things for Nietzsche is how knowledge, how kind of epistemology, how this kind of great collection of data and scientific approaches and so on doesn't actually tell us who we are or what we are. And in fact, it can bury that question. So, you know, he'll talk about the way in which knowers are unknown to ourselves and the fact that we don't understand, let's say, the dark continents within us. And of course, this is very then important for psychoanalysis, for Freud, and for, let's say, people who are interested in a anti-rational, romantic, irrational attempt to describe the human condition, right? And that's not all that's going on with Nietzsche and nature. He clearly sees nature as this extremely powerful force, right? Whether we're talking about human nature, the dark continents, the unknown, the sort of forces of which we are part of. There's a kind of Schopenhauerian dimension to this. The world is kind of will, this sort of like pulsing, endless thing that flows through us and is mediated very slightly in the arts and modulated through music, and we can get a kind of sense of what the will is. And for all our kind of representation and Apollonian attempt to order the chaos, speaking of chaos, the like this chaos will resist, you know, like you cannot think it away, you cannot know it, you cannot understand it fully, right? Like the great Enlightenment fantasy of total domination through reason collapses in the face of the chaotic reality of nature. So I think we start to then like turn inwards into this concept of our own nature as this sort of mysterious place filled with unimaginably violent forces potentially, right? And yeah, we're also going to look at Marxist theories of nature. There's an interesting book by Schmidt called Marxist Theory of Concept of Nature, which is coming out of the Frankfurt School, but trying to look at the way in which industrialization and man's relation to nature transforms it through destruction, but also production. And to try to see if there is a concept of nature in Marx. There clearly is in Engels, but what does it look like in Marx ultimately? Will it just be shot through with like man-made efforts, right? Like, is it a totally transformed nature? Do we live in second nature or even third nature or whatever? And then also, I guess, like, I wanted to look at some of the slightly wacky, more obscure second wave, woo feminism, the great cosmic mother stuff, the kind of goddess worship. Interestingly, on the question of life and death, the argument in this book is by Monica Sue. I'm not sure how you say her names exactly, but it's to say that like women hold the power of life and death, and men are on the side of the machine, right? Which is a very interesting distinction, right? And so that women don't invent anything, possibly true. But what they do is that they are the managers of life and death, and that includes death. Let's be clear. And that there is this kind of great rift actually between men and women on this question. And it challenges the abortion discussion actually in some ways, in a way that we don't necessarily remember actually from the second wave, because what we think we know of that is, oh, okay, Christians are pro-life, and feminists are pro-choice and they want abortion because female autonomy or something, right? And I guess that's sort of the reductionist way we might think of the arguments. But I think this cosmic mother stuff actually changes the foundations upon which that opposition between autonomy and life are made, also through a critique of the organized church. And it's a very, very interesting book, and it's not one that often comes up. So I wanted to look at it particularly on this question of nature and female nature in particular.
That
What else are we doing? Yeah,
just
go on.
on that, I'll never forget meeting somebody who I got to know over a period of time, and she was all about women's empowerment and would, teach workshops on the topic, that kind of thing. And she said that she had been a death doula, but this was like something she kind of told me about in hushed tones. It was not like a something she
Mm.
leads with. It's not something she's public about. She got involved with fertility clinics and was being a midwife, all in Oregon, where you have all these little institutions that were established, in or after the 60s, And so she had been a part of all that, but she'd gotten into death doulaism, which is like assisted dying. She said that she helped at least one person, take their own life. And I remember just being like, this was me at my most maxed out progressive brain kind of phase, and still being kind of just like, wow, wow, this is crazy. But then, at the same time, I'm like thinking like, well, does anything I actually believe say that this is wrong, or does it just feel weird? And so I had to really think about it. It took me back. And her approach to abortion was like, no, it is, you are killing someone, but that is a woman's right. So it's not just like, oh, it's my body, my choice, and
Yeah.
hashtag whatever. It's like, no, women are the portal keepers between life and death, and this is our proper domain. It's our business. And I was just like, wow, never thought about that.
Yeah. So we're going to discuss that.
Yeah.
Um, and oh yeah, I forgot about Darwin. We're going to do Darwin between Nietzsche and Marx. Yeah, and then to think about kind of biology and like Darwinism, I guess, and the way in which that has sort of persisted in some ways, and the way we think about notions of progress, perhaps, and species. Although, like there's a lot of confusion on these on these topics, and I think a lot of modern day thinking about populations and so on is like deeply confused and highly ideological, and again this sort of separation of nature from identity, and this crisis of these great terms really, and whether people are actually default or de facto Darwinists, even if they think they're not, right? Because it goes back to what Dave's saying about not really having a position from which to argue for or against something, right? Which is the kind of liberal nihilistic mindset in a way. It's like, well, maybe I feel like something's wrong, but I actually don't really have a position or a metaphysics or anything from which to argue this, right? So what are we arguing for or with then, right? In the sense of thinking about Darwin, there are Darwinists today still obviously working in evolutionary biology and so on. But I suppose I'm interested more in the way in which Darwinism like persists as a kind of a sort of unstable ideological category. In the way that people think about, usually in an anti-Christian way, right? Like people are in some ways Darwinist because they are anti-Christian, but they're not actually positively Darwinist in some ways. And of course, we'll also talk about the sort of use and abuse of Darwinism in terms of like the ideological function of like term phrases like survival of the fittest or whatever. Like, but I think that question of nature sort of reemerges. It gets immediately politicized, right? In the 20th century as this kind of as if politics can somehow just immediately tap in and manipulate and use the language of biology or evolution for its own ends, right? So can we then separate out a Darwinism that is not political, right? Does that make any sense? So And then that will also feed into the week on psychoanalysis and biology and life, the question of life, which is it's an interesting one because obviously when we think about Lacan in particular, we are thinking already, I think, in a very structured way about language, and the idea of being a maladapted animal, that language is in fact a sort of symptom of the fact that we're not good animals, right? Like that there's something denatured or unnatural about us qua linguistic beings. And again, it's like, what effect does this have? So I've put one piece by Lorenzo Chiesa, who's very, very interested, for very brilliant Lacanian thinking about what is the role of biology in Lacan, right? So um, we're so used to thinking about the symbolic and sexuation rather than sexual difference. Oh, it's almost like naive to refer to biology, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like, we're so clever. We've got these diagrams, and like so I'm interested in like what is the role of the body in psychoanalysis? Can you have psychoanalysis without sexual difference? The answer is no, according to me. But deeper than that, what is the what is the question of biology, right? So Lorenzo talks about the role of Darwin, and so we'll go back over that kind of question. But I think it's a very important one, right? Because what are we bodies with language? What does that mean? Like, what is the role of structure and yeah, our capacity to make diagrams. What animal, what kind of animal over that kind of question, right, in that sense. Yeah, and then I think I haven't put the reading yet because I wanted to put something that's whatever the best contemporary reflection on this, but is the question of AI and technology that we've already discussing in relation to nature. So I think we're gonna find a interesting way into that. Like, I'm not interested in like rights for robots. I'm not interested in this kind of thing. I'm interested in yeah, that opposing, but also in the strongest possible way, the question of transhumanism, what are the really strong arguments that we can mobilize against this stuff? And on what basis, right? Like, what are we fighting for? What is it that we want to defend, protect about the human and non-human nature? What can we protect? What can we not exactly what can we do in that sort of activist way, but really to sort of have a rigorous understanding of what we might be confronting, where we're at now, right? Like, and some of this might involve like looking at some literature, like Ewan Morrison's new book For Emma is a very interesting critique of Neuralink. For example, I would say that Noah Cumin's new novel Stop All the Clocks is a sort of defense of poetry in the face of technology, but it's more subtle than that, right? Like, it's not just opposing the one with the other. Like, it's a much more subtle and intelligent book about the role of coding and machines, indeed, right? Like, because it's I think we've I include myself in this. Like, we've got to be uh more nuanced, more subtle, more serious in the way we understand various oppositions, right? And not just fall into this, oh, prancing around fields, poetry, life versus death machine, bad. Even though in many ways I like feel like that. Yeah. It's like, what are the serious arguments that we can use? Hopefully.
On the last,
Hmm.
I was looking at the selective readings, and when I saw that you didn't have one for that, I was like, oh well, I see AI and transhumanism as a sort of theme, so I just used Nick Land's
Hmm.
face, our friend, our Nick Land. I just put his young face there specifically because it was, obviously the young Land that was super just like gung ho about that kind of stuff. But you're saying, yeah, we're going to spend a little bit more time. You'll spend a lot more time thinking about what reading in particular. So it might not be Land per se, but I was using his face as a
Well,
sort of metonym for
I
that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could. I mean, it's interesting where his latest work has gone. I mean, I commissioned these three essays for Compact, the Solemn Providence pieces, you know, and that's gone in a very interesting direction around the canon and the King James Bible and angels and things that one would not necessarily expect Nick Land to be writing about. Um, yeah, so there's that. But I think we could discuss accelerationism, we could talk about dark enlightenment, we could talk about intelligence escaping the human body and you know all that stuff. I mean, I think it's a good he's you know he's let's put it this way, Land is one of the most, if not the most serious thinker of some of these trajectories, and he has been for 30 years longer at this point. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll work it out. But land would be definitely a good place to start. But
Yeah, it's gonna be the course has already been great, and I'm really looking forward to these next 6 months. I guess just so people who are listening to this are probably getting really excited and going, "Oh, how do I join this course? Oh no, I missed the Spinoza month. Oh no, I missed the Hegel month." Dave, do you maybe really quick just want to like tell everyone how they can actually join the course? That it's not too late. You get access to the previous lectures as well.
Yeah, I recently actually had somebody trying to access one of the past courses in particular and was like, I see it on the website, but I can't just add it to cart as an individual course. What's going on there? And though, of course, that might be a smarter business move for the sake of making things work for now. The way that it is a great deal because you just get access to all the past courses as well as the ongoing courses with your subscription. And so if you don't like that because you don't get to have it as a DVD set that you can own and put on your shelf, I also don't like that. I wish that I could get you the DVDs of everything, but of course nobody does that anymore. And so I cannot be blamed. But you know, it is a little bit like a DIY Netflix over here, where you just get it all through a subscription. And so, you know, you could subscribe for a month and then go on and do other things, or you could decide that you think that supporting and being a part of this kind of thing is just a great thing that you can do, and then you could just be a member. And that's you know, if you just want to check it out, check it out. But also, if you like the idea of this course, it's not too late. You can binge part one pretty easily, and then and you can do it in whatever order you want, right, Nina? Like it doesn't require having done the readings in the orders that we're doing them. You know, you can kind of just
yeah, I mean, I think I do a kind of 20-30 minute introduction in the beginning that hopefully lays out in a clear way like the main dimensions of whichever theorist we were looking at. So yeah, I mean, so just to be clear, we look at ancient Greek conceptions, then we look at Lucretius and Roman conceptions. We did a week on natural law, which I didn't mention, so like Catholic theories and not only, but ideas that there is a way that one should be in relation to one's own nature. Very unpopular set of ideas these days. Spinoza and then Kant and Hegel. Yeah, so those are the yeah six
oh, and
so far.
Heidegger.
What? Are we doing Heidegger?
Well, we did though. I mean, like, oh, were you? Yeah, we did. I just realized we never said Fusus. The whole thing on Heidegger and Fusus.
Oh yeah. So that's true. So when we were looking at the ancient Greek, we looked at Heidegger's Introduction to Metaphysics, right? So yes, that's a good point. Because we were trying to ascertain like the original terms. So physis, where we get physics from, but physis and the ancient sense is you know then becomes natura, becomes nature, but physis is uh a very important term and very interesting in the sense that it includes the idea of a kind of life cycle and growth that is absent in then more later, more sort of rigid conceptions of nature, as if nature is a passive body just waiting to be mapped or dissected, right? So physis is like a living, growing, cyclical thing. Yes, good point, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it was really cool that you did
I
use
spent
that.
ages talking about Prousses. How could I have forgotten? For goodness
Yeah,
sake.
yeah. It's one of my favorite lectures. So yeah, those are available. But also, folks, these come out on a monthly basis. These next 6 parts of part 2. The first part is coming out at the end of this month. There will be, of course, also political theory, introduction to political theory with Benjamin Studebaker happening at the same time. If you're like me and not always able to do the readings, just getting your foot in the door as a sort of placeholder and kind of getting a sense for the context, for the lay of the land, who's saying what do they bring to the table, what might be worth coming back to later, reading and then re-listening and all of that. That is a really big special part of it for me and for a lot of us. And so but right now, you've all got a few weeks. If you were to move on it right now, you've got a few weeks to do the first reading if you are trying to do the readings as it goes. So sign up.
As Benjamin has been saying a lot, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you're interested in this at all, but don't think you're going to have the time or don't have the time to catch up, well, just showing up and listening and letting it, turn on a light bulb in your head is good enough, is better than not doing it at all. If this is something that you're interested in and taking seriously and hearing from Nina and getting to be a part of the discussions. And I think that's advice that I really appreciate as someone who's too busy / still more on like the baby intellectual side of like these texts are daunting. And so just show up, and you'll get a lot out of it either way. And then it'll open up the door to actually visit the text and revisit the lectures and kind of build up on these ideas and thinkers over years. We've got time. There's no rush.
It's a lifelong thing, definitely.
At least it is for me. It is for us, and it is for what we're doing out here. The idea of just going along with the flow and resigning ourselves to, oh, well, it's all beyond my comprehension, and I'm just going to go with it. I do get that because it's a lot, but also I want to have a good life. And maybe we need to keep in mind what Anne said about not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. But a good life, I think, it's not just the examined life. It also, especially nowadays, requires thinking about nature. And we're thinking about what it means to nurture nature, our own nature, the nature out there. Thinking about going back to the beginning here, you're talking about that garden and how it's overly constructed in some ways and how, we've really been returning to this theme of, well, there's nurture and then there's construction. And so we can nurture the inherent tendencies or capacities in the things, bring out the essence of the things, or we can just kind of say, copy, paste, I do what I want, make it what I want it. And that more constructivist approach is not the only possibility. And so learning how to nurture, it's like this puppy right here, this puppy with us. Well, trying to get her to stop peeing in the house, that is nurturing nature, right? Like we could also,
sometimes you have to be cruel. You have to like take out the little dead branches. I'm going to stroke my phone because it annoyed someone last time.
Oh,
so I'm going to stroke it again.
Gonna pet it. Yeah. Yeah, nurture nature.
But no, there's a cruelty in caring, right? Like sometimes you have to be like really brutal.
I'm not brutal with our puppy. I just want to be clear.
No, I don't mean like obscenely, unnecessarily violent or sadistic. I mean like that one must like lay down the rules and
right. When I did make this big show of being disappointed with her earlier today, I was like, and she was shaking. I wasn't yelling at her. I was just like standing over the pee. I was like, Daisy, no. And she was like shaking. She was like, and it's just so sad because I know she needed to go. She just hasn't figured out, ask when you want to go outside. She hasn't made that connection yet. So it's just sad. She's a precious little puppy.
It's really difficult to be to be tough. What do I say? Come on.
Yeah.
I'm joking, no.
I had never seen her shake like that before. So it was just like, wow, this is sobering. Yeah. But anyway, all right. Well, folks, anyway, sign up. Link in the description. I'm going to play a little thing about the studio that's being built right now. That's what I'm going to go spend the afternoon doing. Nina, thank you so much for joining us. Really looking forward to your first lecture.
Yes, thank you.
See you guys again.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
Take care. All right. TU is building a studio. I have officially cleared ground. I've been working on it for the last several months on and off, but am, as of this last week, beginning to get a lot more traction on the project because more money has come in. So thank you so much for those who have already contributed via donations for the TU studio. It's going to happen no matter what, but the question is when. If you want to help speed up the process, make things smoother sailing, and help me keep creating the kinds of content that you love, and even better, the kinds of content that is to come. There's a whole new era getting rolled out. If you want to help make it possible and usher it in smoother and faster, the best way to do that is to make a donation via the Zelle link up on the screen here. You see that QR code? Use that QR code. Once you have an account, that QR code should take you to where you can make the bank transfer with zero charge, which is really sweet, huh? Yeah, we love that. That's why we're using Zelle. Thank you so much for helping make this possible. An advertisement from our sponsors. And we're not sponsored by any corporate or state entities other than ourselves. So I'll just tell you a little bit about some of the past courses and the ongoing courses here at TU. Because if any of them sound exciting to you, well, you can access all of them by becoming a subscriber. That's right, subscribers make all of this possible. Subscribers get access to the course I taught on Martin Heidegger's Being and Time, as well as the course that I taught the first half of last year, Emmanuel Levinas's Totality and Infinity, the second half for which I will be teaching this winter. I've also taught critical media theory and critical doxology and time energy with my wife, Ann Snellgrove McKerracher, who is the co-host on What's Right. Also, you would get access to the course I taught at the university, 3 semesters worth, on Intro to Critical Social Theory and Socioanalysis. But also, we've had lots of other great professors teach Introduction to Marxism by Chris Cutrone, Intro to Lacan via Seminar 11 with Todd McGowan, Introduction to Ivan Illich with Brian Weeks, the Clinical Structures of Psychoanalysis and Autism with Dr. Leon Brenner, the Michael Downs Seminar, Introduction to Slavoj Zizek, Introduction to Nick Land, and Zizek's For They Know Not What They Do, all taught by Michael Downs, as well as What is Sex? That was a collab that I did with Cadell Last. Theory 101, a collab I did with Hello Gorgias. And then also, of course, there's Carl Jaspers' is The Idea of the University, PMC Consciousness and Ideology. These were early, very important courses that I taught with friends at TU back in 2023. And they remain important to this day. Every one of these courses comes out of an overarching research project. There's a real driving force, mission, and agenda to the research going on at TU because we want to understand the situation for the sake of large-scale structural change focused on the good life. What does that actually mean? If you really want to go deep, obviously, these courses are something you could spend the better part of a year binging while at work. Ongoing courses that come out on a monthly basis are the Fundamental Problems and Core Concepts at TU with yours truly, also my seminar, Philosophy of Nature with Nina Power, the Benjamin Studebaker seminar, as well as his course, The 12 Political Theorists. We've got some really exciting stuff coming down the line. The only way to make this all possible and really deepen your knowledge and familiarity with all of these different things is to become a subscriber today at http://theoryunderground.com/subscribe. Thank you.